what you're talking about in your own personal life is an example of how to avoid burnout.
That also links in that whole concept of the square peg and round hole. Burnout's compounded by not being true to who you are. But a lot of us are driven by inappropriate goals or inappropriate milestones, and the making of X amount of money, being a millionaire by 30, whatever it might be, tends to be a slightly false goal because we don't address the root cause and we get to whatever our goal is, but we're still the same person we were before we got there, with all the hang-ups, insecurities, self-limiting beliefs and everything else. And because we've focused on the wrong goal, we've forgotten to bring ourselves along on a journey of that improvement and that getting in the right mindset and the right state to be in the right place at the right time.
Do you find it hard to be effective in your career while maintaining work-life balance? We can often feel like it has to be one or the other. But what if there was a way to achieve both? In this episode, we explore strategies for maintaining effectiveness at work while prioritising mental well-being and personal fulfilment. Welcome to Move Your Mind, your compass for your journey through life. Join us as we navigate the unknown, offering insights, wisdom, and inspiration to guide you toward personal success and fulfillment. I'm your host, Nick Brax, and I've been working in the mental health space for the past 15 years, helping people find direction and gain the courage to take control of their life. My mission is simple: to empower you to become the highest version of yourself. Lacking guidance, I spent the majority of my youth feeling lost and disempowered, which led to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Looking back, I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate what I was experiencing, and as a man, I didn't resonate with the emotional language used in traditional therapy. I didn't need to talk about my feelings. I needed tangible solutions to guide me toward building a life I was proud of. If you can relate, then this podcast is for you. Today's guest, John Fisher, joins me to offer insights into balancing productivity and mental well-being in both your personal and professional life, and discusses tools such as self-reflection and positive psychology to enhance your performance and satisfaction. Ready to upgrade your life? Tune into this episode. John, so nice to meet you. Thank you for making the time all the way from the UK to come on the podcast.
And thank you for inviting me, Nick. It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to our chat.
Appreciate it. And you were saying it's pretty cold and dreary where you are right now?
Cold, wet, raining. I just caught the weather forecast at lunchtime, and we're already 50% above the average rain for this month. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wet.
Yeah. And yeah, I lived in the UK for a little while, and I guess it's like a lot of, it's rare to get sunshine in winter. That's a big part of it.
Especially where I live in the northwest of England. So, yeah, sunshine is an alien concept.
Does that impact people's mental health?
I think it does. I think it impacts in the obvious way with the in inverted commas sad. So those people who have that daylight, we do get less of it here, a lot greyer and a lot more miserable. So I think overall, just that general dampness, that general greyness. Sorry, my window's just over there, so I can. I'm just looking out at the grey. I think it does sort of depress people slightly more or make them feel less happy.
Yep. Yeah, makes sense. I mean, I think, from what I've seen, it's pretty common, and it can be tough, long winters, not what we're used to in Australia, that's for sure.
No, but I suppose what more used to in northern Canada.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's and you know, I've been here for a big part of the winter, and I was always excited about coming to Canada and snow and all that sort of stuff, which I still do love, but the novelty does wear off for me after about probably a week and a half. It wears off, so it didn't take me long.
Yeah. I can imagine, and I've done some training courses with people from Spain and Portugal,
Yeah.
and been with them when they've first seen snow for the first time ever.
Wow.
And it's fascinating being on the other side of that when you've sort of grown up with snow and rain, and to see people and just that general awe
The magic
at
of it.
the wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what I'll talk to my girlfriend about a lot. She's grown up in Canada outside of Toronto and grown up with these winters, and
Mm,
for her and people she's grown up with, it's so normalized, and you're used to having to make it through these cold winters, and to go outside you got to rug up and
yeah.
brush all the snow off your car, and everything's an ordeal. So I can see why now. But yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen snow, it is a magical thing.
Interesting, the concept of having to brush the snow off your car is an
Yeah.
ordeal, where for us in winter it's just 10 minutes early leaving because you've got to brush your snow.
Exactly. Very different.
Yeah.
Very different. Anyway, I might just ask you to give me a background on yourself, bit of your
Mm,
story, and how you wound up to be doing what you're now doing, and what that is.
yeah. Yeah, thank you. I suppose it's an intriguing story on one level, or intriguing for me anyway. Um, was born in a little small town, a market town, just to the south of the Yorkshire Dales, which is an area of lots of hills, lots of sheep, and typical northern English weather. But always wanted to join the Royal Air Force as a child, and at 16 I left school with a couple of minor qualifications and joined the Air Force, and ended up by pure chance working on electronics, aircraft radar systems primarily, but also radio systems, and then later aircraft simulators. And it was something that I fell into without any knowledge or understanding anything about it, and was effectively a bit of a poster child for the imposter syndrome. In I never felt comfortable in electronics. Did a decent job, but it just wasn't me. Didn't feel right. Didn't feel like I knew what I was doing, and so moved out of actual hands-on and moved into project management in the 1990s for a big multinational aerospace manufacturer. And that was start of a big movement that decade for me. I did some counselling training for a local charity or two, and I remember one thing during my training, from being a telephone counsellor to a face-to-face counsellor. um, we had to do a sort of life journey map, and I remember drawing a big squiggle and a lot of crossed lines in there that I called unfocused purposelessness.
Mm.
And that was really a bit of an eye opener. And I'd just been drifting around for a few years without quite knowing what to do. Um, Went back at 30 and did an open university degree, and the Open University is effectively adult education in England, distance learning, and did that in psychology. And so that 90s was a transition into effectively an internal consultant, became a chartered occupational psychologist, so business psychology really, that felt more comfortable doing training, doing coaching, and incorporating that felt a lot more me. And I've been doing that for the last 20, 25 years now, to great joy and loving what I do. Um,
I love that. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. I think when you find the job that's right, or you find your niche, it makes everything so much better. And of course, mental health becomes less insidious, and because you're enjoying what you're doing, you're fit, into the world, and hence it feels a lot righter for you as a person.
Exactly, because then it's not, and this it's a thing that's talked about so much, but we fall into just looking forward all the time, and when I finally make this much money or do this or get this, then I'll be okay. But I think if you can, like in your story there, try different things out, go through that journey, and actually identify what you want to do above all else, and go down that path,
Yeah,
then you're eliminating a lot of, like you're saying, opportunity for mental health issues, because even if it's not necessarily going and taking off in the career, or you're struggling financially, you're still doing what you love doing. You've got
yeah,
purpose.
very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in some ways, sort of money has never been an important driver for me. It's always been job satisfaction. And I've taken a couple of jobs in some of the different industries I've worked in at pay cuts. Because it was something I
Mm.
wanted to do that would give me something else and give me either added skills or wider experience. So I've actually worked in or trained into a lot of different public and private sector and charity organisations. So it's given me quite a good breadth of a lot of industry, a lot of areas that is all just grist to the mill.
That's great. And you really have to have that level of awareness in yourself,
Mm.
and what you're doing to make those decisions, like you're saying there, taking a pay cut to go and do something that you're actually going to be more engaged in, and that probably leads to longer term career success anyway, because you're going to perform better, you're going to be more
Yeah,
engaged, but your health is going to improve as well. So um,
definitely. And
yeah,
as we know, the massive link between physical and mental health.
yeah,
So if you can make sure you're mentally a lot healthier, then that helps keep up some form of physical or helps you go longer as
yeah,
well.
absolutely. And I mean, burnout is one of the biggest problems. You do a lot of
Yeah,
work in the corporate space. You would see it more than anyone. This is a gigantic issue, and
yeah.
that's what you're talking about in your own personal life is an example of how to avoid burnout, I think. So
Yeah,
we see it
I
everywhere.
think you're
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and I think that's important. I think that also links in that whole concept really of the square peg and round hole. And I
Yeah.
think burnout's compounded by not being true to who you are. But a lot of us are driven by inappropriate goals or inappropriate milestones, and the making of X amount of money, being a millionaire by 30, whatever it might be, tends to be a slightly false goal because we don't address the root cause, and we get to whatever our goal is, but we're still the same person we were before we got there, with all the hang-ups, insecurities, self self-limiting beliefs and everything else. And because we've focused on the wrong goal, we've forgotten to bring ourselves along on a journey of that improvement, and that getting in the right mindset and the right state to be in the right place at the right time.
And in many ways, it can actually be a negative if you are going down that path that's wrong for you and you have success. Because if you then have the success and achieve making the money, it validates you. You're then less likely to fall flat on your face and actually have to look deeper within and work out, hang on, what do I actually want to do?
Yeah,
So then you stay in it. And I guess that's what they call golden handcuffs as well in the corporate world. It's that it's such a common thing. And yeah, something I'm definitely interested to talk to you about today.
yeah. And I think it's a double-edged sword, that, because I think there's a
Yeah.
couple of things going on in there. You, at the surface level, start to believe the publicity of this is the right thing to do, this is what I am, but underlying that, you actually know it's wrong, and there's
Yes.
always that little feeling of doubt, or that little prick of conscience that it isn't, that can sort of fester. And one of the things that that I created back in my counselling days was a variation of change and a variation of the change curve. I really took just the sine curve from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and mapped onto it a occupational personal journey through change that looks at the impact or the size and scope of the change on our sense of self-identity. And the larger the impact potentially on our self-identity, the more trouble we'll have, the more we'll go down into that trough of despair, despondency, confusion that's there. And that really came about because when I was doing some counselling for people who had, or family members who had an alcohol dependency, I found a lot of people would come for a session, have a really good session, go away really highly motivated, make an appointment for the following week with some action plans, and not come back. And that happened across the organisation, the charity I was counselling in. So I started exploring that a little bit and thinking about it, and came to a sort of realisation that people were going to lose more than they were going to gain in the short term by changing. Because with people with an alcohol dependency, they've effectively got to change their whole lifestyle, got to change their circle of friends, who they associate, where they associate. And people go away thinking, great, I can do this, wake up the following morning and realise the implications of what they've got to do and how and where they've got to do it. And that's when it starts sort of eroding into their confidence, into their motivation, that they go away and hopefully come back a year or two later when they're readier, but by which time they've obviously deteriorated a lot more as well, and potentially are in a far darker place. And I've been a sort of notch on somebody's counselling stick more than once, where I'm just somewhere in a line of people that take them as far as they can go then, and then they go till they're comfortable to make the next step again. And I think when you're in that suddenly chasing or being successful in a role that isn't you, I think that's where you then get that dichotomy playing and that swing of, I'm really good at this, but I don't want to do it. I'm really good at this, but I'm not enjoying it. And that starts to impact on that sense of identity. I should be better than this. I should know what to do. I should be able to make success in another field. Why can't I? That just creates that tension, creates that stress, that then creates all the negative health and mental health issues that we're getting so much better at talking about, at dealing with. And I think something we touched on just before we started, I'm a northern man, which has certain connotations in the UK. I'm English born, which has certain connotations with the stiff upper lip, the be strong, the you're not there, you're the key, you've got to do it, suck it up type of things. So if we do feel we're struggling, if we do feel some sort of pain, then there's again that added impact on our sense of identity in, I'm a roughy tufty ... Men don't cry. The Gordon Gekko in the 90s from the film Wall Street with the classic, what was it, Lunches for Wimps or whatever it is. And we've got that we've grown up with, and culture is getting better at not, but still defines us in certain pigeonholes that makes it far harder for people to just open up and be authentic, which again has massive implications where they're not authentic on their mental health.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, please click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram at NickBrax. I really appreciate your ongoing support. Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's a super interesting topic, and yeah, I find
Mm,
fascinating all the stuff you're talking about there. And I think it can be confusing as well because mental health, even in the time I've been involved in it for probably the last 13, 14 years, it was not really that talked about, and it was
mm,
had a lot of stigma when I first started, and now it's something everyone talks about. It's sort of more accepted, but I think that makes people think that we've made all of this progress. But especially if we look at men, and I'm sure you see it. I see it in companies. Men are suppressing themselves. Men are,
mm,
in many cases, getting so suppressing themselves to the point where they're committing suicide in the extreme
mm,
cases.
mm.
And there's all of these things going on that we're probably not talking about enough, but there's also not enough resource for men. There's not
Yeah.
enough, um, yeah, there's not that direct line of communication of where to go and what to do. So I think it gets swept under the rug a little bit, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just got such a long way to go.
I think, yeah, I think I'm glad we've taken the first step. And the old Chinese saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And I think we're still around about step one,
Yeah,
but at least we've started that journey. Um, and I think one of the other issues we've got within that is again the society, the cultural impact. And you did a fascinating chat with the youth cricketer, played for the Australian team, went to India and was raped by um, another male on the team or another male in the staff. And I'm a big rugby league fan, and there's been a
yeah,
spate of big suicides in rugby league over the years that have changed rugby league and made it a lot more aware, because some real big names at the height of their careers either did sadly commit suicide or managed to save themselves just beforehand.
mm,
And I think that whole sporting culture again is that you've got to be strong, you can't speak out, and the furore where people have come out as gay
yeah,
in their sports teams, and some of the abuse that they still receive as a result of that shows how little progress we've made in it. But we're now getting more people who are doing that. We're starting to see more people working in the sports field talking about mental health, that I
yes,
think is helping to make that journey. But that whole sports environment sort of encourages you not to say anything, not to speak up, and to damp it down, uh, because that's who you are as an elite athlete, rather than somebody with emotions. And real men don't cry, in inverted commas. So it's, and I think there what's nice is recently I've been watching a few interviews at the end of games, and people have been in tears talking about how much that game meant to them. And I think back to when I started watching it, you didn't see that
mm,
in any way, shape, or form. And people, men especially, in some fields and the younger ones, are becoming far more comfortable with owning their own emotions, which will only help as they get bigger profiles, they become cultural icons. And seeing that, I think, will make a difference in a generation or two.
definitely, it definitely will. So yeah, it's great that it is progressing, but like you're saying there, in any of these pursuits, I think there's even the level of if you are aware of it and you might be talking about it, there's still the feeling, and I know I've had this where I was training to be an elite athlete, and then in my career,
Mm,
even with me talking about these issues and being aware of it, having support systems around me, I'll constantly
mm,
would be ebbing and flowing from burning myself out because I'd be pushing myself and getting frustrated, thinking, telling myself a narrative that I
yeah,
just won't be successful enough unless I am willing to push myself to that level.
yeah,
And we hear this through these motivational speakers that are screaming at the top of their lungs that unless you get up at 3 a.m. and learn to sleep for 3 hours a night and do blah 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 blah, you can't be successful, and
Yeah,
it's toxic and it's not true.
totally. And just definitely not true, and so toxic, and they do more harm than good. And that's what I think I mean by you're chasing inappropriate goals, or you're on that wrong track. Because that just doesn't work. It never has worked, and it never will work. And it's about, I suppose it's about that being true to yourself. It's about making sure you have the right people around you, because I agree it's fundamental to have a support network of people, mentors, coaches, taking time out, whatever the thing is. Mindfulness,
Yeah.
yoga was one thing that came out and started moving. And I think a lot of these martial arts, there's a wider recognition now that they are philosophies rather than fighting techniques. And there's a lot of that philosophy within the stillness, the taking you into a place that's a healthier place that allows you to focus better and to be better. And I think that they're all helping educate people. Um, Many a time on training courses where I've been doing leadership development, I've challenged leaders of all levels and asked them, when did you last have a meeting with yourself?
Mm.
And by that I mean just take the time out to relax, to chill, to just think, to process, to do a little bit of that setting a context and reflecting, and then setting up what to do differently next time, or how to work. And I'm a big fan of appreciative inquiry and positive psychology as well, and do use a lot of those tools and techniques in my life in general, as well as my work. And I think one of the best things that I've come across in some ways is something that when I came across it, the organisation that we're using it called it Plus EBI, which stood for Even Better If. And they turned, or this model turns the whole concept of feedback round from, you don't look at what you did wrong, you look at how do you improve something. So what was really successful about it, I regularly use what you're most proud of over the last month or whatever, what was really successful, and then what one or two things could you make even better next time. So I don't look at weaknesses in inverted commas and try and not use that word, try and not use things like wrong within it, because that sets you up for a negative experience. But look at how do you make it even better. And the even key word, because it implies it's better anyway, or it's good now, which again takes some of that pressure and stress off, because the way we're using the language sets us for a positive experience, and we can usually think of one or two things we'd do differently. And I think that's a really nice model for looking at how we can live our lives, how we can work, how we can achieve goals that work for us in a way that's congruent with who we are and what we are.
Yep. I think that's really really well put what you're saying there, and I find it all so interesting what you're talking about. And if we go back to sort of what we're talking about with burnout, I guess, and
Hmm.
this need to push and make money and go down that path that often could be wrong for us because we get stuck on it. Would you say that is more common in men than women, that happens?
Ooh, that's a really good question, Nick. And I'm not quite. I think I'll answer it by talking a little bit around culture. And certainly for my generation,
Yep.
that was the culture, and that was how we were brought up, how we were, potentially those of us who have children bring up our children. It is still in that sort of culture, that mindset. However, working in manufacturing, working in some industries, I've met some of both male and female who have been very driven, very aggressive, very testosterone fueled, and I've probably met more men than women on that. But I think society has until recently tried to put us into boxes that reinforce that.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a change, and I think we're seeing in some ways we're seeing that now starting to be blurred around the edges, and we're starting to see a lot more of that moderation. So it isn't expected that men go into this job and women go into that job. We're seeing a lot more of that cross-fertilization, and I think we're seeing a lot more portrayal in the media on things like soap operas, where we get men showing their vulnerable side more. And if we link back into business and organisations, then Patrick Lencioni, I think that's how you pronounce his name, talks about the 5 dysfunctions of teams. One of the anecdotes to that is, of course, vulnerable leadership, and that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say you don't know. And I think as that becomes more and more widespread, then I think that again will start changing it for the future generations. Your generation is probably a lot more evenly balanced than mine,
Yeah.
but the generations after you probably will be even more, and their children, etc., will be even more. And I think we're on a journey that's moving away from that. My generation nowhere near. Your generation still a long way to go. Future generations will come a lot closer. Does
Yeah.
that make sense, Nick?
That makes a lot of sense. That does. That definitely does. It really does. So what is the area you're most focused on at the moment?
Um, Interestingly, change is always a big area, and helping
Yeah.
people through change personally or professionally. Um, and doing that through some personality profiles. And my go-to profile is one called Lumina, which their sort of key personality profile has. One of the elements of it is it looks at what they call your personas, and it identifies we have 3 personas. We have our everyday, so how we present in normal life, but we also have our underlying persona. So how would we like to be? How is it when the world is really good with us? But by the same token, we also have our overextended persona, which is when we're under stress, under pressure. How do we operate? And that then puts it onto a hexagon. I don't have one with that hexagon on, but it ends up showing, I'm not sure if you can see that, it ends up giving you that
Okay.
type of picture,
Yeah.
which shows those areas and where you're really strong, where you're really weak on. And then it fits the personas into the same octagon. And by using that and looking at how you individually move depending on the different situations, how close are you, shows how far away from authenticity and congruence you are. If there's a big gap between your everyday and your underlying, then that leaves you open to higher stress, more problems, because you're acting out of character. And unless you're a trained actor, then acting out of character can be difficult for a lot of us in that way. So I'm doing a lot of that both in individuals on a one-to-one coaching, but also in teams, and helping them, the teams, understand each other and understand how to work more effectively with their team members, to then help them communicate even more effectively. So I'm doing that a lot,
That's
and
great.
doing a couple of those next month with different groups of people. And I'm also doing a lot more work in neurodiversity awareness and just the short introductions around that. Became more and more apparent to me over a couple of years ago when I was a coach mentor for people doing the level 5 coaching apprenticeship. And a number of people who were on that apprenticeship that I was supporting through their qualification were neurodiverse. And certainly in the UK, one of the things that's growing is the number of people in their 40s and over who are getting confirmed as having some form of neurodivergence. And so that came across because, of course, I then had to adapt what I do, how I do it, to try and find a working relationship with them that gave them the support they needed. And I've come across people with things like ADHD in training courses before, that maybe just got labelled as a nuisance back in the old days and a pest, low concentration, etc., without recognising that that's a symptom of something more important. So that's sort of a lot of the places I'm at the moment. Obviously, being a chartered psychologist, I have a lot of psychology in everything I do, and a lot of it falls under that positive psychology, appreciative inquiry. George Kelly's personal construct theory influences a lot of what I do, which is about the individual and their drivers. And you've got to understand their drivers to understand how to interact effectively. And solution focus, again, as an appreciative inquiry technique.
Yep, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that. And we finish every episode with 5 closing questions. Before I go into that, what are some of the things you do in your own personal life that help with your mental and physical well-being?
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, I started doing jigsaws and do jigsaw puzzles, and you might just be able to see Hieronymus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights up there.
I can see just in the background, yeah.
That's one of the jigsaws I did last year. So I do quite complex jigsaws. I'm doing an Escher jigsaw at the moment that's all shades of grey. That is so frustratingly good. And I can lose an hour, 2 hours just doing the jigsaw. So it gives me that downtime, that time away. Do a little bit of meditation, mindfulness type meditation. Auto-hypnosis. I've done some training in hypnotherapy. I do read a lot. I read a lot of novels for entertainment, and I read a lot of fact-type books around various different topics. I'm very interested in the Neolithic period, so the stone circles period, and I've got a lot of books on those for the areas. Don't get out into the countryside as much as I'd like, because especially at this time of year when it's wet and damp, and most of the stone circles are in the middle of nowhere. But get out a little bit when I can. So it's those sorts of clear your mind type, taking time out, taking space out, and trusting my intuition a lot more.
Yeah, it's a great example. And I think the jigsaw, that's something that is a really good example for anyone listening, because if you want to, meditate, still your mind or whatever it is, it doesn't have to be actually just sitting there and meditating. It can be any activity that gives you that. I was talking to my girlfriend earlier. For her, it would be painting and things like that. For me, acting gives me that. If I'm in a scene doing it, there's nothing else to focus on other than what's happening. Yeah. So it can be anything. So I think
it's important that falls in. Yeah. Sorry, Nick.
No, you go. You go.
I was just going to say, I think cooking falls into the same category for some people because they focus on, and they've just got that. And it's something that takes the concentration away. And sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it is. And cooking something that I normally don't make the time to do because I'm, busy and I'm feeling like, oh, that's going to be too much time out of my day and
Mm.
everything else. But I've started doing it and I love it. And it's something that I'm making a real, goal this year to start cooking more because, like you're saying, it's so relaxing and you feel
Mm.
amazing after doing it. So I think that's another really good one. Where can our listeners go if they want to learn more about you?
At www.c2d.co.uk. So the C is just the letter C, coaching, counselling, which is why it's a 2 in there, and development. So c2d.co.uk. There's information on me. There's information on some of the papers that I've written, some of the conferences, and some free information on some of the tools and techniques I found really useful over time.
Great. Well, we'll have that in the show notes. So anyone listening, just click on the show notes. That'll take you straight to the link. So we finish with these final five questions.
Hmm, this is where it
So
gets scary.
yeah, exactly. We're going to throw you under the bus here. We're going to see what happens. No, they're not too. Hopefully, not too scary. Pretty straightforward. But first one is, what's your best childhood memory that comes to mind for you?
Ooh, my best childhood memory. That's a really difficult one.
Or one of the best that comes to mind?
Yeah, okay, one of the best. A friend and I, when I was probably early teens, we just went for a walk around the village that we lived in, and we sort of played at explorers, and we spent the whole day walking around, naming places, naming things in our own way, and just got out exploring the edge of the dales and the hills that were around us, and just been out in that sort of countryside.
That's
Loved it.
great. That's great. What do you think's currently the biggest burden on mental health in society?
We still have people in places of power who don't recognize the truth of it. And maybe a short example, in rugby, both codes, they've been having head injury assessments. The doctors come on, the game immediately stops. People go off regularly. And a couple of years ago, one of the Manchester United Football Club, their coach at that time, who's a really famous coach in Europe, one of their players had an head injury and he refused to let the doctors go on to treat the player or to bring him off. And that's where I think it's still wrong. We've not quite educated the people who can make a difference to everybody around them. I think we're doing a good job at educating people. I'm not sure we've quite tapped into the people in power yet to start educating them.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really good point, and that's a common problem in sport.
Mm.
You hear that a lot in
And
Australia
in
with
industry.
yeah, yeah, so many areas.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's a really good one, really important point. What what's your personal definition of happiness?
Ooh, my personal definition of happiness is being good with who I am, where I am, and what I am.
That's great. I really like that
Thank you.
because if we're not, then how can we ever be happy? Because we're always looking for the next thing,
Yeah,
and
yeah. And
I need to
this is
remind
why,
myself that.
yeah, and this is why tattoos and plastic surgery don't always work, because we're changing the surface, not the actual we're changing the symptom, not the actual cause. We're just
Mm,
treating it at surface level. So yeah,
yeah, that's great. What are you most afraid of?
what am I? Ignorance.
I like that. Well, final one. What are you most proud of?
Oh, my change curve. It's got a life of its own. People I've never met um, love it and use it. Oh, look at Canada. I got some bad press in Canada without knowing when one of the regions used it as their redundancy. to help people through, and people reacted negatively about being given the curve. But it's used all over the world. Australia, Tasmania use it. Australia, the US, Canada. It really is. I had one person come up to me at a conference, and as they walked past, they said, "Love your change curve," and was gone. And it's just surreal moments like that of people knowing me from the curve and then realizing I'm the person behind it. It's a bit scary and a bit surreal, but definitely the curve.
Well, that's fantastic and amazing to be able to see, that genuine response people are having and how you've created
Mm,
this piece of information that is helping so many people. I think
yeah,
that's incredible. That's so important and
totally.
a
And
good
I think,
example.
thank
Yeah.
you. And I think, I'm now going to put words in your mouth, so apologies, Nick, but I would assume you get that same pleasure from doing all of these, or else you wouldn't be doing them. So you get that instant gratification, as long as the longer term gratification, knowing that you're making a difference in the world by doing what you're doing, and you are part of the solution, not the problem.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you sort of sometimes forget that it's helping people and then it takes
Mm,
just, one or two conversations and you hear someone tell you that they went and got help because they heard this or this
yeah,
happened and you think, wow, you
yeah,
almost can forget that people are getting that benefit and that's all you sometimes need to
yeah,
hear as a reminder of to keep going with it. But
yeah.
yeah, I think it's a really important one. So thank you for making the time. I think it's fantastic all the work you're doing and I've really enjoyed this chat. Loved connecting with
Mm.
you and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Hopefully, yes. And thank you for having me, Nick. And I say straight back at you with all thank you for all the good work you're doing and by bringing to life some areas that need a light bringing onto them. So keep up the good work.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, John Fisher, for joining me today and offering your insights. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or a DM. Your feedback is always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.